I don't know how many people have come and told me. It's so strange. They said, well, I started making my bed and that made all the difference.
We're built for struggle as a human being. We're built to contend with the world. We're built to contend with reality. You want a challenge, and the best way that you can take on a challenge, because challenges fortifies you. So you don't want to be secure. You want to be strong, and get strong by taking on optimal challenges. And so you lay out your destiny in the world, and you take the slings and arrows of fate, and you make yourself stronger while you're doing so. And you might fall and fortune might do you in, but it's your best bet. And you know people that have extracted unbelievable successes out of catastrophic failures. And so I'm not saying that in a naive way. I know perfectly well what happens to people. You know, you're doing fine in life and then you get cancer, and 6 months later you're dead. And all that heroism in the world, it's not gonna save you at that point. But that's not the point. Life is bounded by morality, but that doesn't mean you don't get out of there and contend you and develop by contending and minimizing the net amount of suffering in the world. And that's something, man. That's something to do. Compare yourself to who were yesterday, not to someone else's today. Because you need to have a hierarchy of improvement. You need to be aiming for something. And that means you're gonna be lesser than people who've always already attained along that dimension. So the question is, who should you defeat in the final analysis? And the answer is, you should defeat your former self. You should be constantly trying to do that. And you're the right control for yourself too, because you're the one who's had all your advantages and disadvantages. And so if you want to compete fairly with someone, then you should be competing with you. If you're improving yourself, then what you are doing is competing with your lesser self. And then you might also ask, well, what is that lesser self? And that lesser self would be resentful and bitter and aggressive and vengeance seeking and all of those things that go along with that, having a negative moral character. And those are things that interfere with your ability to progress as you move forward through life. So it's very necessary to understand that this is why, you know, I've been stressing this idea of personal responsibility. It's like, well, personal responsibility, it's to compete with yourself to be slightly better than yourself in the next day. And it's better in some way that you could actually manage. And that's humility, like, well, I'm a flawed person, I've got my old problem. Could I be as good as person X? It's not the right question. The right question is, could you be slightly better tomorrow than your currently flawed self? And the answer to that is, if you have enough humility to set the bar properly below, then you could be better tomorrow than you are today. And you might say, well, what's the right way of being in the world if there is such a thing, and it's not acting according to a set of rules? It's attempting continually to transcend the flawed things that you currently are. And what's so interesting about that is that the meaning in life is to be found in that pursuit. So I've been laying that out in these discussions too, because they say, well, the fundamental issue is that life is tragic and difficult, very tragic and difficult for everyone, and it's also tainted by malevolence. Because no matter how things are tragic and difficult, but there is always some stupid things that you could do, or someone else could do that could make it even worse than it has to be. And so that's life. And you need an antidote to that, because that could embetter you. Constant contact with that, just a tragedy, but the tragedy combined with betrayal and malevolence, that makes it even worse, especially if it's self-induced. Okay, so you need something to set against that, so that you don't get bitter or resentful. Well, what do you set against that? Doing something worthwhile by your own definition. Say you need some reason to get the hell out of the bed on the terrible day because you've got something good to do. Well, what's the best things you can do? Transcend your current wretched and miserable self. There is meaning to be found in that. And that's the meaning that associated with responsibility. One of the things that I've been trying to lay out clearly is that life is hard. It's stained by malevolence and betrayal that can make you bitter. You need a meaning to offset that. Where the meaning to be found, not in rates, not in impulsive pleasure, but in responsibility. You take responsibility for yourself, so you take care of yourself. If you're good at it, you have some excuses left over to take care of your damn family if you're good at both of those. Then you have some excess left over to take care of your community. Those are heavy burdens. You pick up the burdens. You find that's meaningful. The best way to pick up the burden is to continually improve yourself. And that's where the meaning is to be found. And so that's the meaning is continual self-transcendence, is that letting your old self die and new self be born. Even if things are going really well for you now, there is going to be a time in the future where things are tough. You know, you're going to be ill. A family member is gonna be ill. A dream is gonna be fall apart. You're gonna be uncertain about your employer status. Like the flood is coming, right? The apocalypse is coming. It's always the case in life, and you have to be prepared for it. And the question is how you prepare for it. And the answer to that is to find a way of being that works even under the direst of circumstances. You've got possibility to slowly rise yourself out of the mire. You've got the possibility to do just what the fighter does when he's defeated. Which is to say, well, regardless of the circumstances that might have led to my defeat, even if there were errors in that part of referee, this is no time to whine about it. This is time to take stock of what I did wrong so that I could improve it into the future. And that's the right attitude. The point is, your best strategic position is, how am I insufficient and how can I rectify that? That's what you've got it. And the grasp, if you aim low enough, and I don't mean do not aim, and I don't mean do not aim up, but you have to accept the fact that you can set yourself a goal that can attain. And there is not gonna be much glory in to begin with, because if you're not in a very good shape, the goal that you could attain tomorrow is not very glorious, but it's a hell lot of better than nothing. And it beats the hell out of bitterness. And it's a way better than blaming someone else. It was less dangerous, and you could do it. And what's cool about it? It's one step in a very long journey that it starts to compound on you. So small step today means put you in a position you take a slightly bigger step the next day. And then that puts you in a position to take a slightly bigger step the next day. And you do that for 2 or 3 years, man. You're starting to stride. I don't know how many people have come and told me it's so strange. They said, well, I started making my bed and that's made all the difference. It's like, well, yeah, you decided to aim up, man. And the first concrete instantiation of what was that you made your bed. And you think that nothing heroic, it's like no, but aiming up is heroic, that's something, and that's lowering yourself to the point where you're not above the mess in your room, you know? You're not superordinate to that. You lower yourself so that you strengthen up. You're graceful for what you have right in front of you. You take care of it. You put it in order. It's like all of a sudden things start to get better. And one of the reasons that audiences are responding to what I've been saying in my lectures and what I've been writing about is that I don't tell people that they are okay the way they are now. I say, no. You could be way more than you are, and they're relieved about that. You see, because if you're in a dark and terrible place and someone says that you're okay the way you are, then you do not know what to do about that. It's like, no, I'm not. I'm having a terrible time. I'm hopeless. You're okay the way you are. Well, then what? That's it. That's where I am. And what do you want to tell a young person? You're 17. You're okay the way you are. It's like, no, you're not. You've got 60 years to be better. And you could be way better. You could be incomparably better across the multiple dimensions. And in pursuing the better, that's where you will find the meaning for life, and that will give you the antidote to the suffering. That's the trick things. You have to pick a path of discipline. What path of discipline you have to pick is different issue. There could be a rule. The rule might not be follow the rule. The rule might be you have to follow some rules. So it's a meta rule. And the meta rule is you have to discipline yourself. And the issue is, well, how? That's how really the relevant question. You could pick a disciplinary path. This is why I often tell my clients, especially young people, they say, well, I don't know what to do. It's like, that's okay, nobody does. Go do something, do the best things that you can think of. Put the best plan you have to into practice. It's not gonna be perfect, and it'll change along the way, but it'll change partially. Because you become disciplined, pursue a path. And as you become disciplined, you become wiser. And as you become wiser, you become able of multiple formulate better plans. So you can start vaguely and confused and develop a plan that's not great. And you start to implement it. And you acquire incremental wisdom. As you implement your flawed plan, that enables you to fix the plan. And so the part of that process of incremental self-improvement as well. Imagine you only have 100,000 to get buy a house, and you go look at this house, and it's like, Jesus, this house, man, it's like it's need a lot of work. It's like, well, it's all you've got. Are you going to pretend that the house is okay the way it is? Or are you going to look at where it's rotten and where the plumbing doesn't work or where the stove doesn't work? You have to go and look to see where everything needs to be fixed. And that's harsh, man. And in order to do that properly, someone has to have taught you. It is, look, you aren't your problems, you're most fundamentally that which, if it confronts its problem, can solve them. And that's the hero myth in a nutshell, by the way. The hero is the person who confronts horrible, chaotic potential and fame it and make something out of it. That's the fundamental human story, but the problem is that you have to face what you do not want to face in order to fix it. So you look at all things about yourself that needs to be burned off. You need to be disciplined, messed with. And that man, especially at the beginning, especially if you're screwed up, that maybe like 90% of you, it's not pleasant, but if you know that you are the things that can transcend your problem most fundamentally, if you know you are the thing that if it faces the problem can transcend them, then you have the faith that would enable you to take stock of who you are.